Hello again. According to the Migration Observatory at the University of Oxford, there may be as many as 1.3 million illegal immigrants living in Britain. Personally, I think it's probably at least 2 or 3 times that figure, but still. These are people with no right to be in the country and who would, in an ideal world, be deported. There have long been rumours, though, that there are plans to grant an amnesty towards these people and allow them to stay in Britain permanently. The first tentative step in this process is being taken this week, in that they will all be invited to register with a GP and the assurance given that any information about addresses or anything else given to doctors will not be passed on to the Home Office. This is the thin end of a very, very wide wedge, the beginning of official acknowledgement that these people can stay here. I provide a link to the newspaper report about this in the description to this video. In Britain, anybody can turn up here and stay for 6 months and then vanish. This is very different from the way it is in other countries, who keep a close watch on who they're letting in and how long they stay. And if they overstay their welcome, they hoof them out after a spell in prison. I have mentioned before that I lived in the Middle East for years, a lot of that time in Israel. Some people have concluded that I'm a Jew as a result of this, but that's not so. Otherwise, I would not have had so many rows with the Ministry of the Interior in Israel about my status and work permits and so on. I found the other day an old passport of mine from the 1970s. Here is what I looked like when I was living in the Levant. There's one advantage to having black blood in one's veins, and that is that sunburn is never a problem. In those days, I was so dark I could have passed for an Arab, and indeed sometimes did when my hair was covered. Here's how some countries in that part of the world manage things. This is a visa to enter Syria in 1978. It is for just 15 days. If you didn't tell the police where you were, or you tried to stay on after those 15 days, you would end up in prison and then, if you were very lucky, be deported. Here's a tip: don't fall foul of the Syrian secret police. I don't know what they're like these days, but they were quite a force to be reckoned with 40 or 50 years ago. For Israel, one was granted a 3-month permit to stay in the country. So, this is a 3-month permit to stay in Israel. Right, you weren't allowed to work with that unless you were on a kibbutz or a moshav. I was lucky because I ended up with a work permit, which we can see here. It says permitted to work at. Now, to get that, I had to be a foreign specialist. Unless you have a very definite skill, which an Israeli worker cannot be found with, you can't stay in Israel. You certainly can't work there. If you overstay your visa by a day, then you're going straight to prison. And then after a few months, once they've just established to their own satisfaction you're not an enemy agent or a spy or anything, you'll be deported to the nearest country, Cyprus, Jordan, or anywhere else near to them. They certainly won't fly you home at the taxpayer's expense. Here's what I would do myself if I was in charge of Britain's borders. If anybody landed in Britain, I would not let them stay automatically for 6 months, which is the case at the moment. I'd find out if they were coming for a holiday, and if so, how long that holiday would last. I'd want to know if they had a hotel booked, how much money they had with them, all kinds of things. I would also have a separate process for American tourists and those from Commonwealth countries such as Canada, Australia and New Zealand. The truth is that most customs officials can spot people that are likely to become illegal immigrants a mile off. They dare not treat them any differently, though, lest they be accused of racism. The result is that a wealthy tourist from Miami is treated in precisely the same way as a penniless traveller from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is completely mad. No wonder we have 1 million or more hidden residents in this country. Give the customs, the police and the border force stronger powers, and if that doesn't do the trick, bring in the armed forces.